I want to finish Parshas Seitzei because we have a few more difficult to understand mitzvahs that I want to go through over here. Some of them are really enigmatic, and I'd like to get an idea here. So the first one is, if you look at Perek 23:13.
Which paragraph, Rabbi?
23:13, page 1054. So here, before we even get to that, is just a very interesting idea. Ki Seitzei machane al oivecha, when you go to war against your enemies, v'nishmarta mikol davar ra, you should protect yourself from anything bad happening. Rashi brings down over here, the Satan prosecutes at a time of danger. That means a person who, the way Hashem runs the world is there are normal circumstances and there are dangerous circumstances. And under dangerous circumstances, the person's own stepping into a dangerous situation creates a new reality as far as the balance of his chances of survival. How Hashem works it, and free choice, and the Rosh Hashanah, whatever the case is, that's the fact. So when you're going off to war, it says, "V'nishmarta mikol davar ra." Be careful of anything bad. And the commentaries say anything bad means it generally refers to immorality, and it's often the case, especially for people, soldiers at war. And then it says, "Ki yebecha isha asher lo yeh tohar mikrei rayla," a man who is not pure, he's had a male experience. V'yatzel michutz lamachane, he must leave the camp. Lo yovo el tocha machane, does not enter the Jewish camp. When they're at war, they have the Aron Kodesh with them, so the camp is called it's like the Levite camp. V'haya lifnos erev yirchatz b'mayim, towards evening he washes in water, he goes into a mikvah, ukevo hashemesh yovo el tocha machane, and then when the sun sets, he could enter the camp. So here, one of the commentaries says, this whole thing, which sounds like a description of physical war, is talking about a man's sojourn in this world. And he says, if a man goes out to war with the enemy. The obvious enemy, which we've always spoken about, is the evil inclination. In the Mesilas Yesharim, if you look at the, how do they translate the Mesilas? The Path of the Righteous by Rav Lazato. So it talks about people who are coming back from the battlefront, and they see an old man, and he says to them, you're coming from the easy battle, and now you're entering the difficult battle. Because the easy battle is fighting with people, but you still have the daily battle of fighting with our inclinations.
Out of the frying pan.
Out of the frying pan into a bigger frying pan, right. So he says like this, when you go to war against your enemy, which is the Yetzer Hara, in other words, in this world, v'nishmarta mikol davar ra, you have to take heed, be careful not to fall into any sort of traps over here, not to fall into the trap of temptation. However, ki yebecha ish asher lo yeh tahor mikrei laila, when a man who is not pure from the various occurrences of night, and this world is called the night, person is messed up in life. V'yotza el michutz lamachana, he leaves the camp. This guy has exited the Jewish people. Lo yovo el tocha machana, he's not going to come into the camp in the world to come. This guy's messed up in life. He's in trouble. So it comes along the Torah and says, yeah, he is in trouble, but don't despair. V'haya lifnos erev, towards evening, which refers to towards the end of a person's life. Yirchatz b'mayim, he should wash himself in water. What is water always a symbol of? Tshuva, specifically Torah. Torah is synonymous with water. Ukevo hashemesh, and then when the sun sets on his life, yovo el tocha machane, he'll enter the camp. That means he'll join us in the world to come. That means it's never too late to do tshuva. A person can do tshuva on his deathbed. If a man goes up to a woman and he says to a man who's known as, he's the Al Caponestein of the Jewish world. The guy's just a gangster and a bank robber. And he walks up to a woman and he says to her, Hareyat mikudeshes li, on condition that I'm a tzaddik. She's mikudeshes, she's betrothed, because it could be that at that moment he thought to do tshuva. All you got to do is think it. I mean, sincerely think it, not just thinking because you want to marry the girl. So if a person could flip it over on his deathbed, a person could say, I regret my entire life. A person could, what do you call it? A person could say, I regret in my entire life. As opposed to Oscar Wilde, who was a comedian of some sort, and on his deathbed he said, well, either me or the curtains have got to go. So he's still making jokes. He's still making jokes on his deathbed, right? A person who, there's a story about a woman. I'll get to you one second. There's a story about a woman, these two sisters who had a fight, family fight, and no fight like a family fight. So they stopped talking to each other. They didn't talk to each other for 40 years. It happens. You ever hear of Ann Landers, who wrote they wrote the agony column she was syndicated across the country. She got letters from people writing in, helping people. Oh, my husband doesn't like me, and all these. So there was Ann Landers and there was Dear Abby, which her name was Abigail Van Buren, something like that. They were sisters, helping people with all their social problems in life. And these two sisters didn't talk to each other. They were the ones it's like getting driver's lessons from people who keep crashing. Right? It'd be two sisters that couldn't even get along, and they were helping everybody else with all their family issues. So you never heard of them, Ann Landers, Dear Abby? You never heard? These were famous when I was growing. They were the famous agony columns. So what do you call it? So these two sisters stopped talking to each other, and then finally, after 40 years, one of the sisters got sick. So they came over and said, Leah, Chana's sick and she's asking for you. Chana's on her deathbed. She's got tubes in her. She says, oh, somebody bring Leah. So Leah, they come to Leah and they say, Leah, Chana's sick. She's asking for you. So Leah understands Chana wants to bury the hatchet. No pun intended. She wants to bury the hatchet before she goes. So Leah comes into the house. She comes to the house and Chana's lying there in bed with tubes. And she walks. She goes, oh, Leah. He goes, oh, Chana. So Leah, oh, Chana. And she gets closer and closer and closer. And then Leah. This is documented, by the way, in Leve Leo by Rav Elia Lapian. Leah gets closer to bed, and Chana, with her last ounce of strength, is lying there, and she does like this, and Leah comes closer, she does like this, Leah comes closer, and with her last ounce of strength, she pulls herself up on the pillow, pulls herself up, and bites Leah on the nose as hard as she could, and starts to cause her to bleed, and then collapses back, and she says, now I could go to my grave in peace. Right? That means some people don't give up. Some people, that's not a good way to go out, gentlemen. That's not good. You gotta get past it, as they say. So a person should never give up. It's never too late. A person could have messed up his entire life. I told you we had a guy here at Ohr Somayach. I don't remember exactly. I think. Remember, I told you it's very rare that people come by like Tshuvas in their 60s and 70s and 80s, because it requires to become a Baal Tshuva later in life. Requires admitting that everything you've done up till you've lived a life of a mistake. That's very difficult. When a guy's 20 or 25, yeah, I've lived a mistake. Yeah, it was great, and I'm proud of it, And now it's time to get serious, right? But when you're 65 or 70 or 75, and then to go and admit that everything I've done in my life is a mistake. I heard this. There was a guy here at Ohr Somayach. I think he was 68 when he became a Baal Tshuva, and when he was 86, he made a siyum on Shas. Wow. How do you like that? I like that. Never too late. It's never too late. I want to tell you something else. I have, what my best Musar Sefer is at home? I'll tell you what my best Musar Sefer is at home. It's on the shelf. I never even look at it. I never open it. And not only that's my best Musar, I have a friend who's a doctor. He said it's also his best Musar Sefer. There's a man that I knew who never went, he was a religious guy. He had been in Chicago. He was a religious guy. He'd never been in yeshivas. He had never been in yeshiva. He went to work. He was an accountant his entire life. Eventually, his wife was not well. And they moved into what's it called, an old, not the home, a community like that sort of thing. It wasn't exactly the home. The home is for they could move around, they were mobile. So one Friday night, there's a man in his 80s already. One Friday night, all the people, they asked him to make Kiddush for everybody. He was one of the only men there. They asked him to make Kiddush. Now, this is a guy who, I don't think he ever learned Gemara in his life, maybe some Chumash. They asked him to make Kiddush. So he made Kiddush, and then the next week he made Kiddush. He said a little Dvar Torah before he made Kiddush. So they asked him the next week to say another Dvar Torah. So he said another Dvar Torah. And again, each week he said, and he got a little longer. Eventually he wrote a book after a few years of doing this, of all his Dvar Torahs. I've got the book at home. It's about over 500 pages. Nothing profound, nothing remarkable, but it's a book that this guy wrote a whole life And in his 80s, he covered something that nobody, if you would have asked me who in the world would have done, the last guy would have put the money on. And he actually wrote a book. It's never too late in life. And my father, Olvasho, was very wise. He always said to me, it's never too late to start anything. Guy wants to start learning how to play the guitar. But if I would have started years ago, no, you could start right now. Start right now to learn how to play guitar. It's never too late for anything. And it's certainly never too late to do tshuva. Okay? That's what the commentaries say. Now, here, the Torah gives it one of the most really difficult, really weird, I don't like using the word weird, it's a weird mitzvah. Really a weird mitzvah. Says the Torah, V'yad tiyeh lecha michutz lamachaneh. You should have a place outside the camp when you go to war, and you have your camp. Now remember, the Jewish people, when they went to war, they had the Aron Kodesh with them. And Aron Kodesh, different opinions which Aron they had, whether they had the main Aron Kodesh. But when they went to war, they had an Aron Kodesh, and the camp of the Jewish people was considered like the camp of the Levites in the where they camped originally. And they went out to camp. They went out in their military formation, and it says you should have a yad over here means a place. How does he pray? A place. Outside of the camp, v'yatzasa shamachutz, and you should go out there. That means when you have to relieve yourself, don't relieve yourself in the camp, relieve yourself outside of the camp. And what do? V'yaseid tiyeh lecha al hazeinecha, you should have a shovel among your military equipment. V'haya b'shivtecha chutz, when you go out, v'chafarta ba, you should dig with the shovel, v'shavta v'chisisa seasecha. You should go and you should cover up whatever you do outside the camp, you should cover it up with a shovel. And you have to have in your military equipment, you have to have a shovel with you. Now, stop and think about this. The Jewish man went to war, so they've got, a sword and a bow and arrow and a what do you call it? And a club and a shovel, right? Because let's be considerate of the next person. It's like on the airplane. You ever see on the airplane, the bathrooms on the airplane says, be considerate of the next customer. Clean up after yourself. Then all of a sudden, it's a law in there. And when you're anywhere else in America, you don't have to be considerate, but only on an airplane, right? If you have a gun, you can go shoot up schools. That's perfectly okay. But on an airplane, let's be considerate. Let's make sure to clean up for everybody else. Okay. So you say here, somehow when the Iraqi army attacked Saudi Arabia, somehow I doubt the Iraqis had shovels with them to be considerate of, while they were busy murdering and pillaging in Saudi Arabia. I doubt that they were, just excuse me 1 second, Anwar, I have to go out and relieve myself. Or give me the shovel, will you? Because I want to be considerate of the next guy. And the Jewish people, a guy goes to war, he's got grenades and a machine gun and a handheld rocket launcher and a shovel for the poopy. Right? It just, what's going on here? What's going on here? And then the Torah says, Ki Hashem Elokecha misalech b'kerev machanecha. Hashem is in your midst, latzilcha v'lseiso v'echel lefanecha, to deliver your enemies. V'haya machanecha kodesh, your camp has to be holy. V'lo yireh b'cha ervas dover v'shav macharecha, there should be nothing inappropriate, otherwise Hashem will abandon you. What's going on? So there are two fascinating ideas here, really fascinating ideas. What's the halacha if you walk into a shul to daven and there's excrement on the floor, or even in your house? You can't daven near it. You can't daven near it. Okay, why? The shechina. You can't daven where there's something inappropriate. The Jewish people in their camp when they went to war, what do you think they were doing? What were they doing in this camp? It wasn't like the rest of the armies in the world who, when they were off duty, they're playing poker. What were they doing? They weren't playing poker and drinking beer or fishing. Right? Well, what were they doing? Right? They were davening. They're davening for Hashem's assistance. Well, if you daven, you can't have, what do you call it around? You can't have excrement around when you daven. So you have to go outside the camp. So the Torah is teaching you, davening requires cleanliness. Sometimes I see people daven off of a smartphone. I say, look in the shul, a guy's davening off of his smartphone. There isn't a frum woman in the world who, if there was a sitter accessible, would daven off a smartphone, because women have a sensitivity to davening. The Gemara, as a matter of fact, the Gemara says we learn the times of davening from Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. They are the ones who made Shachris, Mincha, Marav, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. But where do we learn the approach to davening? Anybody know? Not Sarah? Chana, Shmuel's mother Chana. Remarkable that in all of Shas, the way to daven, not when to daven. The way to daven is learned from a woman. Why is that? Because they really daven. They really daven. You know why men need a minyan? Men need a minyan because if we're I know what davening looks like when you're by yourself in a room. I know what they look like. I've been by myself. I know what davening looks more like. In the best scenario, if you're using a sitter, first of all, it takes about 6 minutes on a long day, right? And it's kind of like if there's a newspaper on the thing, you daven while you're reading the newspaper, you know. And if you're davening off of a smartphone, you're goodness, no, I know what now women daven. I say my daughters, they don't need a minyan. You know why men need a minyan? We need an environment that's conducive to get us to focus. When women daven, you ever see a girl daven? This is what they look like. They look like this. From the earliest age, from 6 years old, they stand in the corner like this. And if you ever see them on a bus, you ever see the women davening on a bus? You see firm women davening on a bus. They're davening. They're saying the real davening. And the girl davening, I've seen my daughter davening. Then she comes across the part that says, we skip this. We don't say this on Rosh Chodesh. She's like, this we don't say on Rosh Chodesh. This we don't say on Rosh Chodesh. They just read the whole thing. You know, whatever. They read the whole page. Whatever it says, they daven it. You know, Hayom Yom Rishon b'Shabbat Zikra, Hayom Yom Sheni b'Shabbat Zikra, Hayom Yom Shlishi b'Shabbat Zikra. If it's printed, they say it. We look for to skip as much as possible. They got the whole book. It doesn't matter. They have a sensitivity to it. A man davens. Now, you know what davening off a smartphone is? I mean, let's call a spade, gentlemen. A guy with a smartphone has looked at and has contained on his smartphone pornographic pictures, which, and even in the best scenario, if it's not pornographic, it's inappropriate, and he's looked at them. And now this instrument that he has used and that contains it, now he's going to use that for davening? So it's one thing if a guy's stuck in the desert and he has nothing else, so you daven off your phone. But a man walks into a shul, he could just turn around and reach a sitter, but now, that's davening. That's what davening looks like. And what's he using? You know, it'd be roughly, you have a shtender? You ever seen a desktop shtender? You ever see like on a flat, in shuls, they have like on the flat tables, they have those desktop shtenders that they have. Can you imagine a guy walking into a houseware store and buying a brand new shiny toilet and using that as his desktop shtender? There's nothing wrong with it. There's no excrement in it. There's nothing. And he puts that on a table in a shul to daven off of that thing. Can you imagine such a thing? That's what it is, davening off of a smartphone. That's what davening off of a smartphone is. So the Torah comes along and says, first of all, get all the garbage out of there. You can't daven near this stuff. You can't that's not davening. If there's a sitter available, take a sitter. It's got kedusha. The other thing is, you finish davening, most people, you finish davening, you kiss your sitter, put it away. I can't see kissing a smartphone. Or a guy's learning with his computer. You kiss your computer as you put it away. It's just something not about it doesn't feel the same. He hasn't got that musty sitter smell to it. Right? It's just not the same. Oh, my computer fell on the ground, pick it up and kiss it. It doesn't. Okay, now, number one. So there's an idea over here of cleaning out the area. But more importantly, so the Jewish people are at war. Remember from the beginning of the Parsha, what could happen to a man who goes to war? You turn into a savage. And you might go and take that woman. That's what the Torah says that we talked about, the Yeshivat Torah. And a Jewish man at war, it's kill or be killed, and you're in a different state when you're at war. So what does the Torah say to you? You're right, and I can't tell you not to take that woman. But you have to know that you're going to need a reminder periodically. You need a reminder of who you are. You need a reminder of who you are. And therefore, every few hours, when you go to relieve yourself, take a shovel with you and cover it up. And that's a reminder that you're a human being with human dignity. It's not for the benefit of other people. It's for your own benefit that you go to war. And in the most vulnerable state a person could be in, vis-a-vis himself, turning himself into a savage and an animal. The Torah, you didn't want to be a woman in Germany at the end of World War II when the Russians invaded. And the Russians, when they invaded Germany, Berlin at the end of World War II, it's not like they were a bunch of walking Mesilas Yesharims over, Mister books over there. It was like wild, absolute savage animals. And that's what war is. And the Americans in Vietnam weren't much better. And I remember the stories about even the Americans of Vietnam. So the Torah Jew who goes out to war, yes, I understand there's something pulling you in that direction. You need a counterbalance. What's the counterbalance? Take a shovel with you. And then every few hours you'll have a reminder of your human dignity. That's the idea. That's one of the ideas. The other idea here is, going back to the first idea, the same way that when they went to war, and they have to daven, they have to keep everything out of them. They have to keep everything out. We also are at war, gentlemen. We're at war every day. We're at war with our own inclination, and more than that, we're at war with the world's values. We're surrounded in a world, everything good is bad, and everything bad is good in the world that we live in today. Everything, the leftists, the liberals, all terrible things are wonderful, and anything decent is absolutely horrific. That's the world we live in. We're at war. It's a ridiculous war that we're fighting. So what do we have as a reminder? We need a constant reminder of who we are. Only this. It's our. We're in survival mode right now. We're in survival mode. It's only Torah. It's only Torah that reminds me. You get on the train. My goodness, you got on the train. There are people who look like they have clothing allergies. And I'm wondering if they've got doctor's orders that they're not allowed to wear clothing. I mean, with no shame whatsoever. I mean, forget the attractive, not attractive. Wait, you don't have any self-respect at all? You're willing to walk around looking like a what do you call like an animal out in the you put clothing on an animal. You know, you ever see a dog? The kid, you dress a dog, you put shorts on a dog, you put pants on a dog. It looks ridiculous. Every animal, every time they put a monkey, right? The monkey, they put a hat on the monkey or something. It just looks ridiculous. Because animals are supposed to be naked. And a human being without clothing looks ridiculous like the animal with clothing. And sometimes the animals are wearing more clothing. So what do we do? What chance have we got? We haven't got a fighting chance over here. Wait, there's only one chance. We have our own little shovel. We have our own little reminder, which is that constantly the Torah that we're learning is the reminder that we're different. We're different than everybody else. We're different, and this is the reminder that we're different. So that's on the one hand. On the other hand, in the war, what do we have to do? We have to be davening just like the Jewish people daven. Therefore, we have to get all the schmutz out in order that we could daven successfully. That's the idea over here. A very, very, very bizarre mitzvah. You see one little mitzvah in the Torah of having a shovel, and it's really representative of everything our life is about. Remarkable, remarkable thing. Okay, now take a look at Perek Chav Gimel Pasuk Yud Tes. So here it says, Losia Kedesha Bibenos Yisrael, a Jewish girl. How does he translate 19? A harlot. Okay. Losia Kedesha, Pasuk Yud Ches. There shall not be a promiscuous woman among the daughters of Yisrael. Losia Kedesha Bibenos Yisrael. Promiscuous, that means she makes herself just available for everybody. V'lo Kadesh Bibnei Yisrael. None of the Jewish males should make themselves promiscuous. In other words, you can't go to college. Lo savi esnan, then the Torah says, Lo savi esnan zodna umechir kelev beis Hashem elokecha l'chol neder ki tovas Hashem elokecha gam shnehem. If somebody has paid a harlot for her services, let's say he's given the harlot a sheep for her services. In the old days, they used to barter. She's not allowed to bring, that sheep cannot be brought to the Beis Hamikdash for somebody who wants to bring a korban. Why? Why do you think?
Impure.
There's something about it it's tainted. Oh, where'd you get it? I got the sheep. Well, lady comes to the Beis Hamikdash. Oh, I want to bring a korban. Where'd you get it? Well, I'd rather not say. Well, we'd rather you do. I better not. You'd rather I don't. Or a man who bought it from her. Somebody who buys it from her. Where you got? I got a deal on this. Where, well, downtown Manhattan. I got a deal. No, we're no interest in your deals. All right. That you can't bring. And then it says a mechir kelev, something that's been exchanged for a dog. Now you own a dog, and I own a sheep. So you give me your dog in exchange for a sheep. We bartered it. You can't bring that sheep to the Beis Hamikdash. Why? Because a dog is generally regarded as a lowly creature. A dog is also immoral in public. A dog has no limitations. A dog is indiscreet, not like cats. It says somebody who is immoral could be brought back as a dog, by the way. Somebody who is immoral in this world could actually be brought back as a dog, which is bad. Because when you're brought back, a person, none of us obviously, but a person who's brought back as an animal remembers his previous incarnation as a human being. As a human being, we don't remember our previous incarnation. And we don't know what we wrote. Sometimes you think you do, but that's not. That's what they call deja vu. Right? You ever had deja vu? Yeah, well, it's not. It's not. People say deja vu is reincarnation. It's not. It's probably because you're just overtired or drug flashback. Right? But it has nothing to do with reincarnation. The only time, by the way, the what do you call it? Do you know that it says, I once told you there's a statement in the Gemara, Isha tova matana tova labayla. A good wife is a precious gift to her husband. A good wife is a precious gift to her husband. Doesn't say anything about the husband being a gift to his wife. It says the wife's a precious gift to her husband. So the Ben Ish Chai says, you know why she's called a precious gift? Because it could be in a previous life the husband messed up, and he had to be brought back. This couple was married in a previous life, and the husband messed up. And the wife was brought back. She did good in the previous life. She was brought back for him to get it right the second time. Therefore, she's a gift. She doesn't really have to be here. How do you like that, Mayor? Right? That's I say that's why husbands and wives, sometimes you talk to your wife. It's like this conversation sounds familiar. We've spoken about this once before. Either yesterday or 400 years ago when we were married in Spain. One way or another. So she's brought back as a gift to help her husband get it right. So I always tell the seminary girls, just be discreet. You have to have some tact. This is not the time, if your husband are having an argument, this is not the time for you to say, well, I don't really have to be here. I'm only here because of you. Try not to, what do you call it? Try to be tactful, girl. But at the end of the day, I've seen Kabbalistically, women are not reincarnated, men are. And part of the reason is probably because women are on a higher level. They get it right. Women care. I just saw a story. There was a guy, I didn't know, Starbucks, I know it's a thing. And Starbucks, the only time I've ever had Starbucks is Starbucks coffee, black coffee is kosher. So I was once flying through New York and I needed some coffee. So I went into Starbucks, I had their black coffee. I think it kept me, that stuff was so strong, I think I stayed awake for about a week after that. Okay. So in LA, I actually had Starbucks, and they had in the Starbucks in LA, the guy had under the counter, he had a bottle of Chalav Yisrael. So I could have some Chalav, but in New York, I couldn't have, they had the Starbucks. Now, there's a man, Rabbi Fishbane, who is the head of all the kashrus organizations in America are under one umbrella organization, and he's the head, Rabbi Fishbane, who's actually studied here in Or Lagola. He is the head of the kashrus of organizations in America. So he was pulling into a parking lot, there was a Starbucks. He saw a frum couple walking out of Starbucks, and they were carrying they have one of these specialty drinks there, where everybody has their special Starbucks drinks that they like. I wasn't even aware, I thought it was just coffee. So they're coming out, and he sees they're carrying a certain type of drink, and he says to them, he's in his car, he says, hi, I'm involved in Hechsher, I'm involved in kashrus, that's actually got white wine base in it, touched by a non-Jew, it's actually not kosher. So the husband said to him, mind your own business. He didn't know who he was. The husband just said, mind your own business. Looked like a fruit husband, mind your own business. He just kept walking. So he says, to her credit, the wife just kind of dropped a couple of steps back behind the husband, and she dumped her coffee out. Because once he said it, because women have a conscience, men have a Starbucks, right? Women have a conscience. So so it says that a woman could actually be brought back. Now, we don't remember a previous incarnation. But if a person is brought back as a dog, they do, as an animal. And they realize that they were once a human being and they can't communicate with other human beings. How frustrating is that?
Are those all animals or only some animals?
It could be, there a couple that commits adultery actually could be brought, I just saw they can be brought back as an inanimate object. They brought back a couple of man and women that commit adultery, a married woman, they're brought back as a millstone. Yeah, grinding wheat, they're brought back as a millstone. Right, that's what the Kabbalists say. It's bad. Let's put it there. Just be good, right? Be good. Now, think about this. A guy could have been bad in a previous life, and he's brought back as a dog, and he's owned by his wife and her new husband. How's that? Huh? Yeah, that's bad. Right? All right, so every once in a while he bites the guy. Right, but at the end of the day, at the end of the day, that's why I tell you one of the most sobering lines that I've ever seen anywhere in Torah. It says a man could die, and he could leave all of his money for his wife's next husband. Yeah, Yeah, that's bad. You know, a guy works his whole life and then he just leaves it for his wife's next husband. How do you like that? I told you, Mr. Heinz Ketchup. You heard of what's his name? What was the guy's name who ran for president? Kerry.
Jim Carrey.
Yeah, John Kerry. So you know who he married? He married Mrs. Henrietta Heinz, the widow of the Heinz ketchup, what do you call it, the fortune. Right, so this guy makes ketchup, and then his wife, he dies, and then this John Kerry with his fancy hairdo, right? So this guy's paying for his life. He's got to pay for his hairstylist because his wife married John Kerry. I mean, this guy, if Mr. Heinz Ketchup knew that was going to happen, he would have eaten mustard, right? Can you imagine? Yeah. And if you're brought back as a dog, all right. Now, here the Torah says, why is it that the Torah has to give special warning here? Listen carefully. Why does the Torah says, well, a harlot's not allowed to bring a sheep as a korban. I mean, honestly, most harlots are probably not into Beis Hamikdash stuff. You know, why is the Torah giving this warning? Why is the Torah giving this warning? The answer is because we're concerned about rationalization. That a woman does something, she behaves inappropriately, yet she justifies her behavior once in a while by bringing one of these things to the Beis Hamikdash. And it's a life lesson for many other areas where a guy may have a lot of money and he spends money, he goes to casinos and he spends money on all sorts of inappropriate things, but he rationalizes, well, I give 20% to tzedakah. That becomes my rate. Then everything else is, that puts a hechsher on everything else. Everything else is okay. No, it's not. And the Torah says, and the same thing with the dog is considered even in our own jargon, there are certain animals that, if you say, wow, he's a lion, well, he's a real lion, he's a tiger. Well, that's there's something complimentary about that. If you say that he's a snake, right? That lawyer is a snake. There's something about that's insulting. To say somebody's a dog is never complimentary. To say somebody's a llama, ooh, he's a llama, right? Probably a chilled guy, like llamas. Llamas are pretty chilled, they're just kind of there, right? To say somebody's a dog, I once noticed in all sports, professional sports, college, pro, all sports that you can think of, there's not one team that I know of that's called the Dogs. They're Bears, Lions, all sorts of things. Bulldogs, yes, because that's cool. To be a bulldog is cool. The bulldog, yeah, not a dog. The Denver Dogs. Nobody's called a dog because there's something inherently disrespectful. Therefore, the Torah says that's off limits. Okay, now let's go on to that. Somebody had a question. Mary had a question. Somebody? Yeah. Yeah, make sure you tell your wife that for it, Mayor. By the way, you're a precious gift. You don't really have to be here. Problem is that the woman's like, really? See ya. You got to make sure she can't get. Tell her on Shabbos when she can't get on a train or something. Can't run away. Yeah.
The word Kadesh is promiscuous, but isn't that very close to Kodesh?
Yes. It means separated.
Separate.
Yeah. Very good. Kadesha means separated, just like something that's kadosh. When you get married, when we were at Mayor's wedding, what did he do? Hareat mikudeshes li. Right? You put the ring on her finger. Hareat mikudeshes li. What does mikudeshes mean? So it comes from the word kedusha because Jewish marriage is supposed to be elevated, holy. There's a holiness there. But the word kedusha, the Gemara says, kedusha means separated from all other men. You're separated, you're designated for me, and you're away from all other men. This is a woman who is designated for an illicit pursuit. That's the word kedusha. Okay, good. All right, take a look. These are just, we'll have to continue. Take a look at the next one. Lo sashich le'achicha neshech kesef neshech ochel. You're not allowed to, how does he translate? Very, cause your brother. Okay, that's a good, here, neshech means interest. You're not allowed to lend with interest. Kol dover asher yishach, anything that creates a bite. And neshech is compared, the word neshech comes from the word biting. Why is it called a bite? So the commentaries say, you see, when a snake bites somebody, Ashia, you had a question, I'll get to you in 1 second. When a snake bites somebody, so there's a small puncture that the snake makes. Yet the venom is the snake inserts the venom, and then it swells up. That's what happens with interest. They go, well, it's 3.6% compounded biannually. All right, sounds like a good deal. So you borrow the $10,000 and you got, Next thing you know, you owe, whoa, how do I owe so much money? Whoa, what happened over here? I know when I had to take, last time I had to take a mortgage when my first daughter got married. So they were buying a house, we had to go sign on the mortgage. So I went with my son-in-law's father, who graduated top of his class in Yale, and he also took a course in mortgages. So he had my back. So we went into the bank, and the guy's talking about 3.6% based on prime, with 1/3 is this, and compounded, all these things. And this guy's listening, and he's listening, and I'm also listening, And then I had no idea what they were talking about. I just at a certain point, like, where do I sign? And he's got it all worked out into the penny, and I go, well, what just happened over here? So what happens is you take a loan with it all sounds good. Next thing you know, you owe a tremendous amount of money. Torah says you're not allowed to lend with interest. And then the next posuk says, but the non-Jew you could. Le'achicha lo sashich, but to your brother who's a Jew you can't. Now let's understand this. Number one, what's wrong with interest? And number two, if something's wrong, why am I allowed to lend to a non-Jew with interest? So, especially when you stop and think, the whole world works on interest. Every bank, every business, it's even logical. You're going to borrow $10,000 from me. What are you going to do with the money? You're going to make money. You're borrowing it for a purpose. You're going to benefit from my $10,000. Why should I lend you the money where you're going to benefit, so I'll benefit also? Everybody goes home happy, which is the way the world works. You lend with interest, and it's logical. There's no one in the world that doesn't lend with interest.
Yeah, but he's poor.
What's that?
That's why he needs the money.
Not necessarily. Guy's borrowing money because he wants to start. He just wants to upgrade his business. Plenty of people do that. Guy wants to upgrade, and you can't let a guy. He actually is borrowing money because he's going to be making more money. Yet he'll make money off my money. And not only that, if I give you a lawnmower, I could charge you rent for a lawnmower. That's not considered interest. If I lend you I could rent you my car. I can't. So I'm renting you my money. I'm not charging interest. I'm renting you my money. I'll rent you $10,000. You pay me back $11,000. I'm renting it to you. That's interest by any other name. That's called interest. What's wrong with it? That's called interest. You can't rent your money. I'm not charging you interest. I'm renting it.
He could lose it all and not be able to pay it back.
That's why it's a mitzvah to lend money. That's why people don't want to lend money, because people would rather, I'd better in my pocket than yours. Bimpty. Rosh Tevas Bimpty. BIMPTY // Better in my pocket than yours. That's what Bimpty stands for. Right? Better in my pocket than yours. So why does the Torah, what's going on over here? What's wrong with interest? The whole world goes on interest. The answer, the key word is over here, uleachicha lo sashich. If your brother came to you for a loan, would you charge your brother interest? If you did, you got no class. If your mother came to you for a loan, would you charge her interest? No. And your brother, if your brother needs money, you don't charge your brother interest. Why? Because it's your family. I had a guy in Shir once at Ohr Somayach. I was talking about this, and he said, "Oh, I lent my mother money. I charged her interest." You know what I want to do with this guy? All I want to do is take him back of the barn and whip him. Right? Nothing. That's all right. You charge your mother interest? Maybe she should have charged you for changing your diapers when you were a kid. You charge your mother interest? What kind of you charge your mother? You got no class at all. It's like wearing a sign. I have no class. So the Torah says there are two approaches here. One approach is, listen, you're messing the guy over because it's a bite. The other approach says, there's nothing wrong with interest. Nothing inherently wrong with it. But family is different. Family is different. That's why you can lend to a non-Jew with interest. He's not family. But Jews are all family. And with family, it's different. You have to treat your family differently. And therefore, you lend without interest. That's one of the explanations. There's another explanation here. You see, the problem with interest is if you rent with interest, you ever see the movie Rocky? Yeah. You remember how it starts? He's collecting interest. He's a thug who collects interest. Right? Because he works for some loan shark. and he's collecting interest. Then he becomes he got such a sophisticated movie. So the what do you call it, the dun dun da da dun da da dun da da dun. So he oh, I love that movie. The Torah says like this: part of having to make parnasa, the reason we have to work and make parnasa, is because when you work for a livelihood, especially if you have a business, it's very uncertain. Parnasa is very uncertain. Investments are very uncertain. Life, money is very uncertain. Will you make it? You won't make it. So what do you do jointly with your parnasa pursuit? What do?
Do tzedakah.
You give tzedakah as one thing you do. What else do? You daven like crazy. You daven. You make your effort and you daven. And you hope that you'll make parnasa. You hope you find a job. And you hope the job will pay you enough to pay your bills and pay tuitions. And you hope that, and you got to daven that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to be kind to you and your efforts are going to work. There's one area of life which is a sure thing. It's when you're a loan shark, you lend with interest. All you do is you sit in your office and you open up envelopes with more money than you put out. And the Torah says, you, the borrower, even if you were willing to pay me with interest, you're not allowed to. It's an avera for both. I can't lend you with interest. And Dylan comes to me and says, I need $50,000 for my business. I'll be happy to pay you 10% interest. I'm happy to do it. I just need the cash now because I'm going to make a pile over here. And I'm happy to pay you the interest. I'm not allowed to lend you, and you're not allowed to pay me interest. And if you do, you're sinning also. Why? Because you're hurting my bitachon level, my trust in Allah. I don't need to trust in God. I've got it, it's made, I got it made. I'm lending, it's too easy a parnasa. Torah says you can't lend to a Jew with interest. Why? Because it's going to hurt yourself. It's going to weaken your own faith in God. What about to lend to a non-Jew? That's not going to weaken your faith. You know why? Because that's not a sure thing you're going to get. What's the history of the Jewish people has been? The Jewish people were always money lenders. Why? Why were they money lenders? They were money lenders and they owned taverns. You know why? Because they weren't allowed to work any other jobs. There were always anti-Semitic laws that Jews couldn't work any other jobs. So Jews became money lenders. And then when things got out of hand, what happened? There was a pogrom, and they burnt down the Jewish village so they could burn down all the records of who owed the Jews money. So it was anything but certain that a Jew's going to get his money back. So you can lend to a non-Jew, that's not going to weaken your bitachon. Because when you lend to a non-Jew, you're still going to daven to get it back. When you lend to Feivel over in Shul, so you know he's going to lend you back, he's going to pay you back. And therefore, for two approaches, why it's permissible to a Jew, it's forbidden to a non-Jew. Okay, we'll stop here. We'll continue with this tomorrow.
Thank you. Wow.